Hello and welcome back to the channel. So this video is going to be a bit of an outline of my new composition template. I've just finished building in Cubase 11, literally finished building about 25 minutes ago. So I'm hoping that there's not too many mistakes in it. We might find some things along the way, but the general principles will be applicable. Just for information, it's built in Cubase 11, but the concepts discussed in this don't necessarily apply to any specific DAW. It's really about workflow, and most of the DAWs will have, if not the same facilities, certainly similar facilities. But say for Cubase 11 users, probably particularly pertinent. I had another composition template I was using for a while. I built that from a combination of YouTube videos I'd watched, advice I'd read, read in various forums and online articles, and kind of thought about what I wanted to do and just basically went for it and started building this template. And hey, it kind of worked. It was okay, but there were things that got in the way, and there were things about it I didn't like. And I kind of decided I was going to revisit it recently before the Score Relief 2022 competition was announced. I knew it was kind of coming up. There was been a few hints had been dropped around, so I figured it probably was happening. I thought, let's do it before that hits. So yeah, that's been my life for the last week. Anyway, so basically this version 2 is to address some of the shortcomings of the first template and also to do things slightly differently. And one of the things that I started doing with this one is to just take a look and think about what it is I wanted to achieve first, because that's what I hadn't done with the first one, and that's why it got me in trouble. It worked, but not well. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at what's going on here. I'm going to show you a screenshot of, this is like a combined screenshot of all three screens I'm seeing in front of me. So the center screen is what we were just looking at before. This is the general sort of project window where we're writing. And then on the left-hand side, there's an individual mixer. This is all the different articulations will load into here. Nothing there at the moment because nothing's enabled. And there's a group mixer over on the right-hand side, a master section, and some effect returns. And we'll come back to look at what they all do in a little while. So we're going to go back to this main screen to start off with. So I've got a track divider here, which divides this into two main sections. So I've got kind of metadata above and my individual instruments that'll appear below. There's also this folder of mix groups. This is all the individual buses that all the instruments arrive at. We will look at that a little bit later. Behind this fold, there are some other things as well. So let's just look at what's here. Primarily, I see this stuff, which is my time signature, my tempo track, my marker track, the video, and the film audio. And the film audio is useful because you can do things like look for hit points in a film by seeing the audio, sometimes better than you can by frame. The psychoacoustics of sound, obviously, the sound doesn't arrive at your ears at the moment the thing happens on screen. Sometimes if you work purely off or try to hit your hit points based on the action on screen, you're going to be actually slightly ahead of the game because the audio doesn't happen that quickly. So sometimes being able to see the audio hit point as a waveform is really useful. So that's why that's there. Behind that, we have got some master summing. So I've got 4 groups that everything arrives at. These are kind of masters before we hit the stereo out. So there's a score group, there's a film group, there's an effects group, and there's a render group. I'll come back to what they all do in a little while. I've also got 7 effects returns that have been set up ahead of time. So all the plumbing is done for these. So if I want to insert a reverb, I can just go to my effects return mixer, insert the reverb, and then turn on the send for a particular channel. Again, we'll see that as we go. And then input and output, which has just got my stereo out. And these are all here because if I want to do automation on these things, they're readily available. I can get access to the automation lanes for these pretty quickly. But as I say, most of the time when I'm writing, all of that stuff is going to be out of the way, and I will just be seeing these 5 here. Below the fold is where all the instruments are going to appear, and as I say, this folder of mix groups, which most of the time will just be hidden out of the way. So let's just drop a film in here just so that we can see something. So if I import a video, let's just import the Sprite Fright animation, for example. So I'm going to insert that, and you'll see it's been inserted onto the video track. That's because I had the video track selected and I was at the appropriate point, bar 5 in my music, which is where I wanted things to start. And as I say, you can see I've got the video and film set up. Now, before I go any further, I should say that I've got a Stream Deck attached to this machine as well. And this is what my Cubase, it's a 32 button Stream Deck XL. There's a couple of different pages for it, but the main one is this one here that we're looking at. There's 3 buttons on here, or 4 buttons, which are going to be sort of useful. I'll just tell you what they do, so when you see things happening on screen, you can understand why. This zoom button here allows me to zoom in and out on a track at any time. The track ED button allows me to enable and disable tracks, which is it's very core to how this template works. And the hide button, which hides everything that's not enabled, and the show button that shows all. So all of those are going to be useful. So the first thing is, obviously, if I wanted to zoom in on the film audio, I can hit my zoom button, and I can zoom straight in. And that means that I can now do things like placing markers based on, where the audio is and so forth. Let's zoom that back out again, and let's bring this divider back up here. Okay, so what about writing music? Well, let's get into that first. So if I want to start writing something here, I need to enable an instrument first to do that. So I do that through this search button up the top. Everything is color-coded and everything has a naming convention. So if I want to find violin 1, I type VLN 1, and that shows me. I'm just going to collapse the mix group so it doesn't confuse us. But all this stuff above is all articulations. At the moment, I've only got the BBC Symphony Orchestra Core Edition library installed because I just want to try this with a few things before I load other libraries. So other libraries will eventually get added to this, but for the moment, and let's just say I want the legato group. And then on the Stream Deck, I press that track enable disable button I talked about before, and that will enable this track. The first time, because it's the first time loading BBC SO, it's going to take a couple of seconds because it has to load the plugin as well. And that's taking longer than it should, but there it is. Okay, so that's now loaded. What else have we got? Let's add a French horn. So we'll do FR for French horn. Let's do a French horn short marcato, and let's enable that. Let's grab a woodwind. Let's do a clarinet. CLA for clarinet. Let's do a clarinet to long flutter. Track enable that, and then finally we'll do a harp. So harp sustain, and enable. So straight away you can see it's very, very quick and very, very easy to load these instruments up. Let's just do some virtual recording just by double clicking some parts in here. So as you can see, once I start recording, this is how it's going to look. Color coding obviously applies to the parts in here as well. I might name these things, certain things like themes and things like that. I might not, it just depends. A lot of the time I don't bother. Sometimes I will though, if it's a specific theme, I just want to mark it out so it's easy to copy around. And sometimes I might actually change the color coding on these tracks to highlight certain things. Very rarely though, most of the time I just go with the defaults. Okay, so let's take a look at what's happening on the left-hand screen, because since we started enabling tracks, this left-hand mixer is no longer blank. You can see now that it has tracks that are appearing inside it. So there's my clarinet long flutter, my short marcato French horn, my harp, and my violin 1 legato. So the two things to note about this mixer, the first thing is that at the top, if you look at the routing, you'll see that all of these tracks are not routed to the stereo out. Nothing is routed directly to the stereo out. It hits a group at some point before it gets to stereo out. So this one is routed to clarinet long, this one to horn short, this one to harps, and this one to violin 1 legato. We'll see more about where they're ending up later, but it's just important to note nothing hits the stereo out. I've got access to inserts if I want to insert anything. That's just standard Cubase features. There's nothing weird about that. But the other thing is I've set up sends ahead of time. So each one of these individual articulations can be sent to any one of these 7 predefined effects groups, and also this last group, which is called a render group, and that is for something which is kind of specific to me. You could just make this an 8th effect group if you wanted to, but yeah, I'll explain why I do that in a little while when we get to it. But so turning an effect on is simply a matter of enabling it, and then setting how much we're sending to it. So that's all pretty straightforward, and of course we can make it pre or post pretty easily as well. Okay, let's collapse all that stuff up. In fact, we can leave it expanded. Let's go back to the center screen again. Okay, so we can see what's happening there. Now let's take a look at the right-hand mix group, the right-hand screen, because this is where all the mix groups arrive. So let's take a look at that violin 1 legato group I talked about before. There it is. That channel there is violin 1 legato. So the channel, if I go back to the left screen again, this channel here, this violin, our routing was going to violin 1 leg. And if we go back to the right-hand screen, we can see that is this channel here, violin 1 leg. If we look at the routing for that channel, again, this is not going directly to the stereo master. This is being routed to a channel called score, which is over here on the right-hand side. And then finally, score is being routed to the stereo out. So I'll come and explain what these are in a second. But before we do that, just a quick note on what's happening. I'll explain this mixer a little bit more when we look at the mixing phase, but you can see that everything's being sent to score. Each of these group channels is being sent to the score. And I've also got the same send setup that I had previously. So effects 1 through to 7 and my renders. Going back to that left-hand screen, even though I have the send set up here, I would very rarely use them from individual articulations. I probably would send more from a group to an effect, but sometimes that's different. And like I said, it's not just an orchestral template, so sometimes my needs are different. Anyway, it's all set up ahead of time. That's the main thing. Okay, so let's go back to the center screen. So yeah, so this is all my general sort of writing stuff. There's nothing mystical about this. It's just standard Cubase fare. I don't think there's anything really we need more to talk about on here. I don't think. No, I think we're pretty much there, pretty much good to go. Okay, so let's have a look at the other mode that this template operates in, and that is in the mix mode. So I'm going to switch this over to mix, and what you will see is the center screen of a gigantic mixer. So to explain what's happening here, as I say, this is only the center part. There are two other parts to the left and the right, which we'll look at in a second. On my fourth screen now, where the picture was before when I was writing, is now the arrange window for Cubase. I can't really show you that because the OBS screen gets in the way, but it is effectively what we were looking at before in the center screen is now up on the fourth screen, and that just allows me to very quickly navigate through the project and tell where I am. But this mixer, as I say, it does have to scroll to some degree because it's quite big. So it still has to scroll a little bit. And if I just pan from the left to the right, you can see what's going on here. So on the left-hand screen, this is the left-hand edge of the mixer. And I've got a set of markers down the left-hand side here as well. So any markers that I've put in the film, there's that in marker, which existed already, are sitting in this left-hand panel. So I can very quickly navigate around the film just by selecting the appropriate marker. Then we have the beginning of the group mixer. If we pan to the center screen, this is the center part of the group mixer. And then when we pan to the right-hand side of the screen, this is the right-hand part of the group mixer. And I will have to click back in Cubase so you can see the rest of it. There it is, yeah. So this is the right-hand part of the group mixer. Over here, I've got my effect returns, which I can scroll through in here. I've got a VU meter, which I find invaluable. And I've got some stuff set up here for monitoring. That's actually selecting the wrong one at the moment. So I'm just going to set that up to mix. Hello, mix. Yeah, which is just my loudness control. So I can hit standards and so forth. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this group mixer. Let's go back to the center part of it. Actually, no, before we do that, let's go back over to, the right-hand side part of this mixer. These were these channels I set up before I haven't really talked about. So everything arrives at the score channel, and then the score is routed to the stereo out. The film is just the audio for the film, and the effects is where all the effect returns are. You'll notice that all of these effect returns don't return to the stereo master either. They return to an effects channel, which then returns to the stereo master. So why do I do that? Well, if I'm hearing an artifact in a sound and I want to figure out if it's effect, I can very quickly mute all the effects just by muting that effect master. So everything that's coming back from an effect return is coming into this, and I can mute it if I need to. I can also solo, which is not very useful, but listen certainly is. I can listen to the effect returns to see what's going on. I can also solo the score if I just want to hear what's going on solo-wise or hear what's going on instrumentally. I can also mute the film. So this just allows me to very quickly configure what I'm hearing based on what I'm looking for. Most of the time, they'll just be as they are, sitting there in standard mode as such. The other one is this render, which you'll notice is pulled down at the moment. Render is a special purpose thing, and I might come back to explain what that is in a minute. Well, let's look at the mixer first, and then if I remember, I'll come back to what that does. Okay, so we'll go back to the center screen so we can just see a portion of the mixer, and I'm just going to scroll so we've got the brass in view. Where are we? He says, no, we're not. Sorry, we're not going to do that at all. We're going to scroll so we can get the... How are we going to do this? Trying to get this to all sit on one screen. It won't do it. So what we'll do is we'll look at Woodwinds instead, and I'll pan over to the left-hand screen. Okay. So here's my Woodwind group, all in blue. Here's the groups. There's a flute legato, flute long, flute short, piccolo legato, piccolo long, piccolo short, oboe long, legato, oboe long, oboe short. You get the picture. So any one of those individual channels, so all of my long articulations are arriving at this fader. And don't forget, routing wise, this is all going to the score fader, not to the stereo out. And then I can individually adjust the volume of any of these. So if I want to just adjust the overall volume of longs, I can. Hopefully I've done a reasonably good job of balancing the sections before I actually come to actually doing this part of the mixing phase. And then also I have a VCA fader here. So this VCA fader controls all of the faders to the left of it. So if I've got individual mixing going on here where I've brought my shorts down a little bit and I've brought my legato down a little bit, if I want to drop the overall volume of the flutes, I can just do this with the VCA fader. So that's basically my master as such for my flute section. The reason I've done it with VCA faders as opposed to another group is because it mucks around with your effect, with your gain staging into effects. If you start grouping again and then adjusting that, I don't want to do that. All I want to do is just get master control of these, have these move proportionally to each other, but still maintain any gain staging I might have into effects here. You know, if I've got effects turned on, I just don't want to play with that too much. So that's the idea of that, make it more flexible. The other thing which is nice about this, and this is where it probably makes more sense, is if let's get back to the center screen so you can see what's going on. So up here, I can change what channels I'm seeing. Now, currently I'm seeing group channels, VCAs and outputs. If I turn off the group channels, and then I'll just bring this mixer into the center a little bit more, just bear with me a second. And in fact, I can bring the right edge of it in as well. So now this all sits on a single screen. This is now like a very, very top level mixer. It's all my VCA faders. There's a downside to this is that I can't actually see what's happening audio wise because I've got no metering for a VCA fader, but it's enough for if I'm doing a final mix. To be honest, most of the time I wouldn't bother with that. Let's just put it back to mix view and we'll turn back on the group channels. Okay, so that's how this kind of mixer works. And as I say, it does have to scroll because of the size of it, but I can scroll very easily because I've turned on, let's make sure you're seeing the same thing I am, yep, because I've turned on the track overview feature at the top of the Cubase mixer window, and that just allows me to grab that and use it as an easy kind of scrolling thing. The other thing to note is, of course, that I may not necessarily, let's say, for example, I'm doing a hybrid score and I'm only using woodwinds and strings. Let's say I'm not using brass, tuned percussion, or untuned percussion. So one of the things I can do, and I think I'm going to have to switch windows again so you can see this. Okay, so I'm just going to enable this left-hand panel here, which allows me to see the visibility and zone information for this mixer. Under mix groups, you remember I said that I wasn't going to use any horns, so I can grab all of the horns and disable those down to there. And then I can grab all of the percussion, tuned and untuned. Let's say I'm not using any of that either. And so everything else let's say I'm not using any synths. So let's turn the synths off as well. So now when I come back to, let's get rid of the left-hand screen. Now we can see that this mixer is now considerably smaller. I'll come back to the center screen again for a second, and I'm just going to bring this in. Now, obviously, this is not the kind of thing I want to be doing all the time, moving stuff around like this. But, okay, we can just see the center part of that. But now you can see that as we scroll it, we're not getting all of the stuff that we got before, if it will scroll for me. Oh, it won't scroll because it doesn't need to, that's why. Yeah, so all I'm seeing now on this mixer, if I just pan around the screens, you'll see I've got the left-hand edge, which is just this little bit here, the center screen, which is the center part of it, and the right screen, which is the right part of it. But you can see it's considerably smaller than it was before. And the point I'm making is that when I get to the mix stage, I can just turn off channels I'm not using and make my life a little bit easier because I don't have to look at everything. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Let's just go back to the default. Yeah, let's go back to the default mix workspace. Just make sure I haven't missed anything. Oh, there's some tracks we need to turn back on. So let's do that. Let's turn back on all of these and all of the brass. And what were the other ones we turned off? Synths. Let's turn all those back on as well. And we can take you back to the center screen. I've kind of lost my way here. There we go. All right, so we're back on the center screen and we have everything there. And now, as I say, this is back to scrolling. So the only other thing which is worth noting. No, actually, I think that's it. I'm just going to say anything else I say is probably just going to add more confusion now. So, all right, so that's basically the way it works. It's probably not the most thorough and organized video I've ever made, but as I say, I've only just finished building this recently. I just want to give people insight into what I've been doing. If you've got any questions on why I did what I did, or how I've done what I've done, or questions about building your own template, feel free. I'm probably doing a more detailed breakdown of this at some stage, but as I say, at least it gives you an idea of what this process has been all about. I think that's it for now. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to see some new stuff coming up. I will also leave details about the QTube, which is the fantastic group which is organising this score relief contest, which I'm about to enter. Really good if you're into media composition, if you're looking for pre-existing videos to practice scoring to. It's fantastic. They've got an awesome curated library, really, really great community. They're on Discord now, and the Discord community is flourishing. There's lots of great chat in there. So yeah, if you're looking for something like that, check the details in the description below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.